So if we are having a budgets previous with the same name, then we will simply set the condition as like I will write the budgets over here, just a second, and then it will find that if the previous budgets have holding any budget with the same name, that is it will hold a function parameter with budget, and then I will pass the budget. I will compare the budget dot name. It will be dot. So I will compare the budget dot name over here is if it is equals to the name we are passing. Now if this goes equal, then it will return me the previous budget only, nothing else. So we have done it till that is if we come firstly we will compare if there is anything with the same budget name, then it will return the present array only, it will not add our new budget over there. Now here comes the question is that how it will get this name and max value. So obviously we have to pass these values with our function only. So I will pass the name and the max from here. Now we have done with the function, and I will just simply explain that once again, that the function add budget is basically working as it will pass two parameters with it, that is one the name of the budget we want to adding and the max value we want to previously add with that initially, and then after calling the function it will set the budget and it will hold the previous budgets already is there in the array, and if it finds the array and the budget we are updating have the same name, it will invoke that process and it will return our previous budgets only. But if it not, in such case it will return a new array with the previous budgets and the new budget name we are passing. For the add expenses, it will have the same kind of function here over here, and I will just paste the same thing, but in case of set budgets it will have set expenses obviously, and we have created the use state, and I will edit this, and in case of set previous budgets it will obviously have the previous expenses. I will just rename it over here, and in this expenses it will don't need this checking of the names, and then it will have some new parameters we will pass over here. So the parameters will be our description for the expenses, and then the with the comma it will paste a amount will pass through the function, and then a budget id, that is on which budget we specifically are targeting. Then we'll simply pass these three values inside our function. So I will cut this and I will paste over here. Okay, so our function is now holding two functions, is already working actually, the function with add expenses and then the add budget. Now we'll obviously have some error, we'll fix this later on until we give the expenses or budget a proper, and then we have some expenses over here, that this expenses obviously will be written over here also. Now our functions are working. Now we have came so far with the two functions, that is add budget and add expenses. Now let's make our delete budgets and delete expenses also. So the delete working function is very simple. It will also use the filter method over here. So firstly we will have to pass the id, it is on which budget we are wanting to delete that id, specific id of the budget. Then we just have to set the budget again, and these budgets I will call the set budgets, and inside this set budgets it will again hold the previous budgets, and by this way we can delete is that it will hold each element of the budget, and then I will call the function, that is a fat arrow function. I will call again the previous budgets, and it will just filter over inside this each budgets. I will filter, and then I will filter only those budgets, let's say inside this, where budget with again a function where the budget dot id is not equals to the id we are passing. So we will just remove that budget and we will just pass all the other budgets without this id. So by this we can delete one budget specifically. So this is the way it is working mainly. and for the delete expenses it will going to be the exact same code over here. I will paste the thing over here, and then for the set expenses I will set the set expenses, and previous budgets I will set as previous expenses, let's say. And then for the filter it will then again filter the expense, and it will work the same. So I will just explain shortly these two function. The delete budget is just getting one id with it, and it is again the setting the budgets with the array, and it will filter, and then obviously it will have to return this, otherwise it will not work. And here it will also have to return, else we will not give the value by running this function. Either it is not having in return statement previously, now it will work properly. So what it is doing is that it is setting the budgets with the previous budgets it is holding in it inside this variable, and then it will filter the each budget, and then within each budget it will filter with the id, and it will return us all the budgets without this id. So by this we can delete, as well as we can delete the expenses and budget also. Let's head towards our next lesson for our next section. Now here will be one optional category, or you can say optional thing for the deleting the budget. That is, suppose a budget have some expenses. Let's say a budget have 3 or 4 expenses. So when we delete the budget, the expenses must get stored inside an uncategorized budget. So we will do one thing, that we will handle deleting the budget, but also let's say I will comment one line here, and I will say handle uncategorized budget. So this will do the thing, that is, if we delete one budget, and if the budget is continuing or containing any like 1 2 3 expenses, then the expenses will add together inside the uncategorized budget. So let's say if we delete 3 budgets, so if 3 budgets each including 3 expenses each, so 3 into 3 9 expenses will add up together into the uncategorized budget. Now there is one thing also, let's say you are creating one budget and storing expenses, but as we are not using any database, so the storage or the data might get lost when you again restart the server or you visit this server again. So what should we do in that condition? We will use one custom hook. So the custom hook is mainly to use the local storage. So I will make one folder over here, let's say hooks. So these hooks will contain all the types of hooks we are want to create. Now in these hooks I will use local storage hook.js. So this will mainly contain our local storage using procedure inside this hook. That is, we will save our data inside our local storage, as because if we revisit this site again, then we can see what we have done previously. So to use the local storage, firstly we will introduce a function. Let's say the function I will write over here, and the function will named as, let's say, use local storage, so that I can call this function inside our any file. I will just write the function name use local storage, and then it will handle 2 parameters. The first one will be the key, that is the local storage name, let's say the name. For example, if you consider an object, the keys are the thing what we are going to make here, and both the key represent the same thing only. And also a default value, that is, if the storage have containing something, then it will return within the key, else it will just return the default value. It will contain a state inside it, and the state will named as the value and then set value. And I will use obviously the use state over here, so I will just mention use state, and it will automatically import, and initially the use state will contain a function. Now you must be familiar with making the custom hooks here, otherwise you cannot understand. So if you don't familiar with these custom hooks, I will want to mention that please go through a custom hooks lecture, so that you can understand how we'll want to create. Now it is very easier to use a function initially within the use state, so that we can just import this file inside any file, and then we can call the use local storage inside if we calling the use state. That is, use state will automatically deleted the data when we refresh the page, but use local storage will set the data as we are using the local storage. Now inside this function I will announce a fat arrow function, and that's it for this use local storage. Now inside this function we will initialize a constant as, let's say, JSON value. This will hold our value inside the local storage, and I have to initialize the local storage over here, and this local storage will get the items with the key we are passing through it. And then we will check with the condition if the JSON value is not equals to, let's say if it is not equals to null, that means it is holding some value, then it will just return the JSON, and it will JSON parse the value we are giving inside and the JSON value. So that's it. So this line mainly says if, hey, the program is, if it is containing any values in local storage, then it will return simply. And then we will give up another condition, the type of, let's say if the default value we are having firstly or initially is a type of function, then we have to set a condition that if it is a type of function, then it will check over there, and then what it will do is that it will return something, and that something is that the default value itself if it is a type of function. So I have given ending bracket over here, and then else we have to set a condition is it will just return the default value, but it not a function in here. Now we have done with that. Now it will simply just return the use state we are announcing in the topmost of this function. So I will just return and then the value, and then set value. So we are done with the first thing. Now we have to do in, so this will just simply store the values, but we have to do something, that is it will update the value inside the local storage in case we want to update anything. So to update the value we have to simply use another hook of React, that is use effect. So I hope you are familiar with the use effect hook, that is it will simply regenerate, or it will simply regenerate, or it will simply, so in the use effect we will give the function, I will enter the function as a fat arrow function over here, and this function will mainly trigger or called when there is a change in the array with the key and value we are passing. Let's say if I pass this array or the state with key and value, so when there is a change in these values it will simply update. And how it will update, I will call the local storage over here, and then it will now set the items, it will now set item with the key passing through it, and then the JSON, and I will stringify the value, that I will convert it to a string, and what I will convert the value itself. And that's all we are doing to for updating the storage over here. After we have done with the use effect, now we have to just export the function at the default. I will just export the function, but with the default, make sure the default is mentioned here, else the function will not be acceptable inside if you use another. Now we have to use this function inside our budget context, so we have to use the first we have to import it. So I will import it as a function, and then I will use the use local storage from, and then the file path we have to give, and it will just go beside the context folder, and it will go inside the hooks, and then our use context or use local storage hook. Now we can paste our use local storage instead of our use state. Now we will here paste it simply, and we have to pass a key also. So the key here will be, let's say, budgets, and the second one we have to pass the key, so as because we have made the function like that to work with the key. And for the second one I will pass again a key, let's say expenses, and I have to put a comma, and I will save this budget context and also the use local storage. Now I am getting an error as because the export is not perfect. Okay, so I will just take it as without the brackets and let's save them. Okay, it's saying the React hook use local storage cannot be called at the top level. React hook must be called in a React function. Okay, it must be called in a React function. So what's the problem over here is that, okay, so according to the error we have to just initialize this thing inside our application. So I have cut it in inside and I have to paste inside this children, otherwise it will obviously not work, that it is a custom hook. And I will save it, and let's say if it is rendered. Okay, expenses is not defined. Expenses is not defined in line 24. Let's say what's the error. Let's see. Okay, so I have done a mistake here. We have to push this function inside the export thing also. So I will cut the things and I will put it inside the component, as because it will obviously not work. So that I will put it all the thing over here and I will save it. Let's see if it is rendering properly or not. Okay, so id is not defined in say line number 52. So this is the main problem. If you learn how to debug it will be very easy for you. Okay, the id is not defined, so we have to pass the id over here. I will pass the id. Let's save again. Let's see if it is rendering or not, and if we get any error we'll obviously solve it. Okay, so there is no error. Or now we can simply inspect this page. Let's say how I will show you how the local storage is working properly. So I will slide the inspect tab over here and I will go to the application over here. And this application will contain the local storage, and you can see a budget and expenses, and both are undefined as because empty array, and that's why it is showing the budgets and expenses. Now this way the local storage is actually working. Now if I save anything, as because I have been saved for a test in the budgets, you can see, and this budget it's showing an id. I have saved 3 budgets for my own purpose, and that budget is showing over here, but the expenses are empty as because I haven't make any expenses. That is why it's showing like that. Now for the form group, we have to pass one control ID. That means it what specific control it will do. That is, this specific form group will only denotes to the input value for the number or the budget name only. So I will give the control ID for this, and the control id, let's say I will give it as the name, let's say for the budget name, and then I will copy the control id, and this control id will be passed over here too as the name of, let's say, max. And then the for the number of type of input, then we have to pass one minimum and maximum value. So I will pass the minimum, and this minimum will do 0. So I will pass the minimum as 0, and then the counting step. So the counting step means while we are increasing the type of input as numeric, we will make this as 0.01. Now to give the modal appear in our browser, we have to call the modal first. Now before calling, we have to debug some mistake. That is, here I have to write deact bootstrap, else it will not able to catch the modal and form. And I have made the function handle submit as blank. Also you have to make the button. I have commented it out, so I will just undo it. I will just uncomment, and we also have the button present over here. Now to add the modal in our main page, we just simply have to import this file. So to import this file, I will go to app.js and I will simply import this file. So I will write import, and I will write add budget modal as the name we have saved with the name of our file. and I have imported it successfully. Now I will just copy this name and I will paste it outside the container, obviously, as because we have to hold the whole thing inside a formatter. Now I will paste the file name over here and it will be a self-closing tag, and as you can see it is showing an error as because we have to unwrap in within a formatter react form fragment. Now the error will be gone, and then we have to pass the show equals to true, or simply we can pass the show, as because show we have given here. I will make you, as because the show is here we have passed, that is show equals to show, that is if the show will be there it will then show us the modal, else it will not. So I will save and let's head towards our browser and if it is showing or not. Okay, so it is showing an error, that is button is not defined in line number 24 or 26. So let head towards 25 and 26. Okay, the button is not defined, we have to import the button also. So I will just simply import the button over here. Now after button is imported I will save, and let's say that modal is appearing or not, it will take some time. And okay, the modal is obviously appearing and it will take the name and the max value, as you can see, and the max value will increase from 0.01, and then again itself, as because we have given the step as 0.01. Now the modal is available here rightly. Now to actually submit this form we have to give identification to our this two inputs, that is one name and the max value. So for those identification we have to use the useref from React. So I will simply import the useref, and this useref will be imported from React only. So I will let's press the control plus space and it will give us the React suggestion. So I will just simply type React. Now this useref will be used inside our function. So I will initialize two constants. Let's say I will give constant, and make sure you spell it correctly. I will give the constant. First one, let's say our name ref, and it will hold useref, and the second one will be the same, but it will be a max ref. Let's say name it as max ref, and then down here we can just write inside the form control for the name reference. So I will type for the name here, that is ref equals to, it will hold the name ref obviously. So this ref will be equals to the name ref, and I will simply copy this and it will paste to the second form control for the max value, and I will paste it over here. It will also contain the ref, but inside here it will passed as the max ref. Now basically it's giving the reference for the values. Now we have to work in the use ref initialization. Now what we have done is that actually give reference for the function and name ref and max ref. Now inside the function we have to just handle the function, and to handle the function we'll do what is that we'll first take the e and we'll type e dot prevent default, and this e dot prevent default will help us to restrict the refresh or invoke the refresh of the browser on the form submit. And secondly we will have to make the object to store the budget, or the mainly the budget IDs or budget name and max values mainly. So I will give a name as the key, and this name will hold the name ref and then dot current dot value. So it will mainly hold the current value inside the name input, and then by the same way it will hold the next thing, that is the max ref. And for the max ref I will pass, instead of name I will pass it as max, and but inside in this case it will have to just parse the integer as float. So I will just parse float, and this parse float will include this whole function. So I will make this function inside this bracket and I will close the bracket. Okay, the comma will be omitted, and this will mainly take the max ref inside the parse float. Now the whole string will actually be inserted inside our add budget function. Now we will do one thing, is that we'll enclose it inside the first bracket and I will give the add budget function over here, and this add budget function is coming from where? So we have to take this or destructure that add budget, and to destructure that I will initialize a constant over here, and I will add the destructure method. So I will say add budget, and this add budget will take the add budget from the use budget we have previously used. So I will say use budget, and we have to mainly use the budget. Sometimes it imports automatically, but in our case it is not importing, so we have to import this use budget. So as we all know where the use budget is actually coming from, the use budget is actually coming from our hooks we have already made, that is the budget context, and from here the use budget is actually coming. This is the use budget, so we will just import this budget context. So to import that I will simply write import, then use, then budgets, and this will just import and use budgets from, I will to specify the path. So it will go outside the folder once, and then it will go to the context, and then it will go to the file name with budget context. So it should show here. Okay, it is showing. Now let's see if we have spelled it right or not. The use budget, the function is over here. Okay, I have given the use budget, but here I have misspelled use budgets, so I have to paste it over here and format the page, and then I will save, and let's see it's running properly in our browser or not. So it's working properly. Let's see with inspect. Firstly I will inspect the thing, and we will compare if the budget is adding on our adding any kind of information over here. So I will go to the application, and the application we will obviously have to check the local storage, and as we have seen previously I was having 5 budgets mainly. It is showing the index number with 4. Now I will want a budget, let's say react module with tutorial. The max value will be, let's say, 5000, and let me add this. So as you can see there is a budget added over here with the name react module with tutorial, and the max value is 5000. So we have added it successfully. Now we can say that our function is working finely. As the budget is adding now, so we have to find a way to close the module also. So we have, let's head towards the module, and let's head towards app.js to work with the module. And as you know, I will close these things, and in the budget modal we have also one function named handle close. So I will pass this function from here also. So now let's say we have to use a state. Now let's say the show will be true, obviously, else it will not be seen in our screen. So if I pass it as false, and if I save it, it will obviously close the modal. So let's wait for a second, and you can see as it close the modal. Now we have to set a state, that is on clicking on the button it will set the modal as false. Now I will, let's say, pass here show modal, and then I will copy this. Let's say I'll copy, and I will pass the handle close as, let's say, set show modal. I will make it a capitalize. Then we have to use the use state from the react. I will import the use state. I will import the use state from the react from our package, and then I have to initialize one constant to use the useState. So let's say the constant with the show modal and set show modal. I have to capitalize the S, and in the end it will use the useState. So I will use the useState, but initially it will be false. Now on clicking our add button it will make it true. So let's say I will copy it, and in our add budget I will give a on click function, on click parameter over here. So on click it will do what is that, it will just simply call that function. So I will give a fat arrow function, and it will simply set this modal as false. So it must be initially true, else it will get to false. Okay, so no, sorry, this will be true obviously, else it will not hide. And then there is also a thing we need to do here, that is we cannot just directly call the set show modal as okay. So you have to pass the parameter also, that is it will pass it as true, and then we have to just call the function, and then it will just set the show modal. Let's save it, and when we will pass this add budget it will show the modal, and we can just simply, let's say I will give a for test for React course, and the maximum value will be, let's say, 1200. And if I add this, let's say if I add this, it will obviously add the thing, and we have to handle the close also over here. So to handle the close I have to pass it as false, else it will not handle the close. So the thing I want to try to do is that when I click on the add button, it should close the modal over here. So let's save it, and let's again give time to the browser to render it, and I will simply rename the course, let's say for React course, and the same amount, and I add. Now the problem is there that the modal was not automatically closing, is because let's see if we have done any mistake. Okay, so we haven't handled the close over here, so we have to make the close function used over here. I will pass the handle close over here to just set the modal close, and I will submit or save everything, and let's see if it is working properly or not. So we will refresh once our application and for the test run, and I will add one budget, let's say ETR or something, and let's say for 34445 I will add, and okay, it is just showing, or it is closing automatically. Now where are our these budget cards going on? So we have to render everything inside our browser. To do that we will have to map through the all the budgets we are actually saving inside our local storage. And to map through our budget, so we have to look through our budget. So what we do is that we will mention everything over here. So I will do the budgets dot map, and then it will hold a function within itself as, let's say, the budget, a single this budget will mainly hold a single budget, and then we will return or render. So I will simply, rather than giving the brackets, we can say we will use the third bracket, and I will say return, and then I will simply paste a budget cut inside this return statement. So I will just cut this over here, I will paste this, and let me format it once. I'll save it. So it will obviously give us error because it doesn't know what the budget is. So to render it that properly, what we can do, okay, so we have also an error over here, so we will solve it later on. But the thing we need to do here is that we have to solve the budgets where it is coming from mainly. And to use the budgets we have to make sure that we can import the used budgets from there. So we have to destructure it again. So I will say constant, and then I will say the and say constant, then I will say the budgets, and the budgets will mainly hold. So to use the budgets we have to import or destructure it. So I will say constant budgets is equals to use budgets, and we have to import the use budgets. To import that I will give an import statement over here. I will use the import, then use budget, and it will be imported from our the main file, that is our budget context. So here we are using the use budget, this one we have to mainly import this. So inside our app.js we will give the file path name. I will give it as here, then context, it will go to the context. So inside context it will go to the budget context, and it will take this or call this file from that, and then we can simply manage it properly and use budget. Okay, though it will be use budget, and then let's see if it is rendering or not. Okay, so we still have an error. The error is over here, and we can do simply one thing is that we can just get rid of this return statement, and we can simply put 1 second bracket over here so that it properly returns one budget. And the problem it is creating, that we haven't closed one tag over here, and if I save it, it will just look through all the budgets we still have in our local storage, and as you can see it has looked through all the storage, but still we have no the different values. So I will just copy this budget, and instead of name what we have to simply write is that the budget and dot the name of the budget. Let's save it once, and let's say if it is providing all the datas. And okay, so it is providing all the datas I have saved in my local storage. As you can see, the entertainment, the 4 React codes we have rendered, and we also need the values or max values. But before that, for every rendering item we have to provide a key, and this key will be a unique key, must be, else it will give us error in the console. So I will provide the budget.id, it will be unique, and for the budget.amount, and for the max it will be budget.max. Simple. Then we can, okay, it will be max, not mx. I will save it, and let's say in the browser if it renders or not. And after rendering, as you can see, it is showing the amount as nan, and this is because the nan, it must be 0, that is why it's showing the nan. And to make it correct, what we have to do, we have to destructure the expenses from these budgets also. So I will simply destructure this method from the budget context, that is the get budget expenses. So I can get the expenses through this function. So I will simply destructure the function over here, and I can call the function inside this. So now it's time to give it a second bracket. We'll get rid of the first bracket, and then I will have to give a return statement over here, and now we can provide our function inside this. I will take a constant to store the amount. So I will take a variable name or constant name as amount, and it will be equals to the function we have get from our destructuring. So this function will take the current budget id. And why it will take current budget id? Because we are passing the id, and it is returning what, our expenses dot filter. It is filtering the id and giving addition of the all the expenses. Now I will get budget dot id, and inside this id it will be reduced. Now how it can be reduced? I will simply type dot reduce, and the reduce function will mainly reduce it to how, that is I will pass two things, firstly the total and then the expense, and these two parameters will work. And mainly I am making a fatter function, and it will take the total, and then it will add the total with the expense, and the expense dot amount it will check. and for to initialize with the 0, I will just pass a 0 over here. And let me just clarify what this function is actually doing. So I am saying the function is that, hey, I have a variable name amount, and you just calculate all the expenses and return me the amount, and I will simply pass this amount to this amount variable, and it's simple as that. So if I save that, it must take all the amounts, and by that way it can check all the things. And how it is, oh, okay, we are getting one error because we are getting one expected. Okay, so I will give you a return statement over here, and it is showing something unexpected. Okay, so we have to give a second bracket also here. Now I have corrected the mistake. Let's refresh it once and see if our app is rendering properly or not. So I have solved the issue over there that it was returning for the one brackets, and now we can see it is showing us all the values, as because it is 0 for now, because we have not any expenses, we just have the max value, and that's why it's just saying the 0. And that is why we have initialized this function, that is a get budget expenses. Mainly it will give us all the amounts or expenses we have right now, and if it exceeds, then it will give the red mark obviously. So that is all about this part of the card that we have rendered it successfully, and we can just see or calculate the expenses up to this. Now coming to the expenses part, what I have done is that I have created another file name as add expense budgets, or the add expense model. So I have copied the whole budget model over here, but I have made some small changes. So what are the small changes are those is that I have named the function name as add expense model, and in case of the parameters I have changed it to show and handle close and a default budget ID. And as because we are using the use ref, so I will use three user, as because it will include one description, one amount, and one budget also. And we are calling the add expenses function, as because we are using the add budget function to adding the budget, and add expenses function over here to adding the expenses. Also we are calling the budgets so that we can achieve, or we can just fetch all the budgets we have now or we have uploaded, so that we can compare each budgets and we can make this drop down list, that is this budget you can see over here. Now to do that, the function of handle submit is same, but a light changes, as I will pass one description ref, one amount ref, and one budget ref. And description ref will obviously contain the current value, amount ref will obviously contain the current value, but within a parts float. And the budget ref will obviously contain the current value. So what we have done till now is that we have just included one new use ref, and that is named as budget ref, and changes the another two as amount ref and description ref. We are calling the add expenses function and the budgets, and to get all this list of budgets we can just compare to, and we are using the used budget from we have imported the context, and inside our function, that is which will actually handling the submit function. So I have give the event pre-vault so that it doesn't refresh, and then the add expenses, and then three keys for our object to update it in the local storage, that is description ref, amount ref, and budget ref. Then it will handle the close function, that is on adding this it will just simply handle the close function, or it will simply close. Now inside the modal there will be some changes, because as you can see the modal is now much bigger, and it have some text changes, that is firstly the new expenses, it will obviously be changed, and from the first group you can say the first I can give an enter over here, it will differentiate you, and the first group I can say as description, second as the amount, and last as the budget. So I will make it a caps A. And now the description is doing what is that it will simply refer to the description ref, and everything is same as before, and the ref for the amount will go refer to the amount ref. This is simple. And we have now, there is the thing we have announced a new, or we have added some new thing, is that a new form group. And the group or the form group I have used here, I will simply explain it slowly so that you can understand by one line. The thing is that firstly we have labeled it as the budget, and we have used a form select rather than using form control, and obviously it will include a enclosing tag. And this select is working normally as HTML select, but it will work have some, as in HTML we used to use that default value for a selected tag, but here we have to pass the default value as default value equals to the default budget ID we have passed, as you can see in line number 43. So this default budget ID is mainly coming from the budget ID we are receiving from these parameters. So this default ID I mean to say is that, suppose you are opening the expenses, or you want to add the expenses for entertainment. So in that modal it must have contained or selected the default ID, that is entertainment. This form select will mainly refer to the budget ref, as because we want to take the budget reference ID, and then it will render all the budgets over here. Now we have to map through or look through the budgets as we are getting from the context file, and in the map function we are taking one parameter as budget, that is this will select all the single budget inside this budget variable, and then we are simply passing the option, and this option tag will mainly hold this all the options. As you can see in the right side we have all the budgets over here, and we must have to pass a key for it so that it will hold a unique identity for that, and then a value. The value will be the same as key, and then so that we can just recognize it with the ID, and then the budget name we are simply passing it. So that's it for the select, and then the primary button and the modal is end. And this is what we just made in the add expense modal. Now you can make the changes and go with the tutorial. Now, as I have said previously, to manage the deleted items or deleted budgets inside an uncategorized budget, so I will do this now. That is, we firstly have to head towards our context file, and here I just have to get rid of this. We don't need this one, and I will place here one constant, or we can just export the constant over here, and I will say export a constant, and that constant name is uncategorized budget ID. So this constant will mainly give the reference of the uncategorized budget ID we used to pass. Now I will put the value in inverted comma, and I will simply write uncategorized. Now as we have created this variable, so we must have the variable inside our budget list also, so that we can put expense in our uncategorized budget. So to view this uncategorized, what we have to do is that, okay, there is a spelling mistake, I will just leave it as here as Z, and after saving it we just have to import this variable. So to import this, we'll go to the expense modal, and inside this modal I will simply import over here. I will give a comma and paste this, and then we can use this value inside our option. So before this budget is rendering, what I will do is that I will give a default option. So I will put an option over here, and this option will mainly hold the uncategorized variable. So if I save this and let the browser time to render, and as you can see, the firstly it will hold the uncategorized thing or the uncategorized variable over here. Now rather than just printing the variable, what we have to do, the variable, as I have given uncategorized text for testing, so the variable mainly will hold the ID of the budget, we will put it into uncategorized section. So I will manually pass the value over here, and then I will put this option ID, and this ID will take the budget ID, that is uncategorized budget ID. Now what we can do is that to set this modal for the closing of the modal. Now to do that we have to do the same thing over here for as we have done in the budget. So I will name here as the show modal, so I will give show expense modal and set expense model. I will delete the show word here and I will save it, and then also I will create a function to manage this. Let's say I will create one function, and this function, let name the function as open add expense model. So this will mainly open the expense model, and for now I will keep it as empty. And also we'll be needing one use state extra. So for what, I will just explain you. Let me create the one another use state, and then add expense. I am just renaming it add expense model budget ID. So why I am giving this long name is this, so that I can recognize it easily. So what this thing will do is that it will get the budget ID also within the model, so that we can differentiate. Now this budget ID will initially be blank. It will not contain any false or something else. So inside this function, now let's head towards this function. This function will firstly will just set the expense model to true. So that's because it will open the model. So I will pass a boolean value that is true over here. And secondly, it will just also it must take the budget ID, else it cannot clarify that is which budget ID. It must just add the expenses, and then it will set the expense, set add expense model budget ID. With that budget ID I am passing, or we are just passing it through. So I will give the budget ID. So this budget ID is mainly referring to this budget ID, and if we set this, and on we have to just pass this function on clicking event. So inside the add expense, here we will pass the on click event. I will just copy this part, and inside this add expense I will pass on click, and on click I will just paste this function, so that on clicking on the add expense button, it will just simply copy, or it will just simply call this function. So this function will do what is that it will mainly select, or it will call the uncategorized as default. That is, if we do something, that is firstly if we just take the global button, and it will initially be uncategorized. So I have to handle the specific budget card click event. What I have done is that previously it was mapping to the budget, but inside the budget card I have passed one add expense click. This will be a click event. I will define it later on, and then it will work was as a function, and this function is mainly we are passing an open add expenses model with the budget ID. Now we have to head towards our budget card. So to define this on add expense click, so I will go to the budget cut firstly. So let's head towards our budget cut.js, and inside this I will just close it, and inside the parameter we are receiving after the gray, we will simply pass this, that is add expense click, and then we have to define this add expense click work function over here. Now as we have imported the, so after this what we have to do is that we have to pass this function along on click event through our view expense or add, oh sorry. So now we have to just pass along this function we have imported over here. As you can see, the on add expenses click, so this is the click event. So I will pass it over here on the pass, that is add expense, as this is, as we know, as a specific budget card. So it will contain one ID, and if we click on the add expense button on that specific budget card, so the budget ID or budget name will be selected initially with that budget name only. So I will give on click event over here. So I will give on click, and then it will call simply this function. Now it's just simply recalling the function. Now we'll head towards our app.js. Now inside our app.js we just have to handle the close, and inside the handle close I will just uncomment it, and it will obviously not use the set show model, that is we have used our new model to define for expenses. So I will just use it over here, that is the set expense model, and this set expense model will be defined over here to false, so to handle the close mainly. So I will save it and let's see if it is working or not. And before testing it, what we have also done one mistake is that we haven't passed the default ID value over here. So I will just pass the default budget ID. So this default budget ID is obviously coming from the add expenses model. I have initially given here the default budget ID so that we can track the budget ID on clicking here, and then we will pass the budget ID through our add expenses model. As you can see how it is working, it is mainly the use state, and this use state is having the budget ID we are clicking on. So on open expense model, this will just simply handle the ID of the budget card we are clicking on. Now also to hide the model initially, I have to pass the show expense model over here. I will copy and I have to pass the show expense model over here, and then if we save it, it must work properly. So let it be refresh inside our browser, and then the model will automatically get close. And if I just click on this test add expense, it will give us a test selected by default, and then test ttt, and if I click on entertainment, it will give us selected the entertainment by default. So as you can see, our function is working properly now. And then if we just add some budget over here, so I will give a test over here. So suppose if I test if I add, now to handle the uncategorized section, that is what I mean to say, if we add something in the or we delete any budgets. For example, if I add some budget inside any, let's say inside this entertainment, let's say I add some expenses, sorry for saying budget, I will just have to say it's expenses. Let's give a description and I will add expenses. So then I will add again a expense, let's say 66, and then so now as you can see it is increasing. But what if I delete this budget? Then it must go all the expenses inside uncategorized section, and for now I have changed the INR to dollar, so I will just change it again. So that is not matter. So what how to do that? So I have created one component inside the component folder named uncategorized budget card. Now this I have simply imported our budget card over here, and also the use budgets and uncategorized budget ID what we are using previously from the context budgets. Now what we are doing is that import budget card from budget card, it will simply import, but what we are exporting is that it will takes the props. Now the props, firstly let's focus on the return statement. So in the return statement, it is basically giving us the budget card, then the amount, and then I will define the amount later on, then the name as uncategorized, so that the name will show here uncategorized, then the gray and the props. And the line above the return statement is basically notifying this if the amount is zero, because if, so for suppose we haven't related any of the budgets, so the amount is basically zero, then it will return null. Basically it means that it will not return that specific uncategorized, that means it will not return that specific budget card of uncategorized. Now let's test if I add anything inside our budget. Add, let's say if I add any expenses, let's say for amount 200 or 200. Now if I say test description, and I will put it in the uncategorized. Now if I scroll down, you can see the uncategorized over here. Now you can see one thing you have noticed, that is the slash or the maximum value is not showing over here, and the uncategorized progress bar is also not showing. So how this is happening is that inside our budget card, I will head towards our budget card module or component, and you can see I have given here a condition in the line number 27, that is if it is max then only it will show, else it will not show. The simple thing is that that is basically a React syntax of typing that conditional statements, and also it will not show the progress bar if the max have any value. So if the max is basically null now, so the progress bar will not show anything. That's why we have created this uncategorized part or budget card. Now we need one more budget cut, that is the total. As you can see, the total is over here. So I will show you how it is rendering actually. So for the total, I have created one more component over here, that is total budget card, and it is actually very simple. It is holding the same thing, that budget card and the use budget. So how it is working is that, and firstly it will take the budget card import and the use budget also, and it will return the statements, and in the return statement is simply getting the amounts and totaling all the amounts, and it will not show a progress bar for now, and the hidden buttons obviously, because the total must need not any button, any kind of buttons. And then above the return statement, inside the return statement, what we have done is that the constant with max, it will just hold the budgets, all the budgets, and reduce to the total and budget. We are passing two parameters, and as you all know, we have done this before also. So it will basically get all the maximum values or the budgets. So that's all for the total budget, and we have done 90% of the project over here. That is, the uncategorized is also done and the total also done. Now we have left with the deleting part. Now also, what I have to make changes is that to hide the button, you can, or you have to give this hide button conditions inside our budget card. In the line number 43, as you can see, if not hidden buttons, then it will show, else it will show all the things. So the else part is not basically mentioned here. So if the hide buttons is mentioned, then it will show the buttons, else it will not show. So that's why I want to make this knowingly. And the total is basically passing all the expenses maximum values, so that like all the values are getting added up and it is passing in the total. So if you are curious about how we are passing this uncategorized card over here inside our app.js, you can take this view now, that is we are passing the uncategorized tutorial, and also that is we are passing this uncategorized budget card component, and on add expenses click we are passing this function, and we are receiving this also, and on view expenses click we are just giving the uncategorized id, budget id. And this budget id is mainly having, I will provide all the codes inside the lecture, don't need to worry about it. You can just, if you don't understand the some parts of the video, so if you don't have enough way to find the bugs, you can just check the codes where I will provide in the notes lecture. So by this way the uncategorized is working, that is for unclear. So let's see if I again add something in uncategorized expenses. So I will say the amount and the description. So what I want to make sure is that I can just add the expenses over there and view expenses button, and I have made the add expenses button working over there by this way. Just clicking on the clicking event, I have passed the same function, that is we are previously passing inside our budget card also. So that's all for the uncategorized and total. Now for the view expenses, I can give you a view over here, that is by this way we can create the modal. So this will be the same modal we will be using, or we have previously used inside our input of the add expense or expenses or budgets, and we will be copying the same thing. So I have already copied the same thing over here, but with some few changes. So no need to worry about if you have done along with me. You just copy paste the code with the notes lecture I have given, and you can just analyze them. So I will explain one by one. Firstly, what we are returning. So what we are returning is a simple modal, and with a header. The header is basically handling the over the all the delete buttons. So the header title is holding expenses and the budget name. That is, we will click on which budget, and the button, that is delete, and it will handle a delete budget function. I will discuss the delete budget function also, and the delete is here, and the outline is danger because it will be delete button with a red color. And what's the body is containing? The body is mainly containing our direction will be vertical, that is one by one all the expenses, and as we are getting all the expenses, and you can see where we can get all the expenses from the get budget expenses and budget id, the same function we have used previously. And by the same way we can just map through the expenses and show all them. And how we are showing is that we're using the stack, and firstly a div with class me auto, that is margin end with auto with a gap, and then fs4, that is font size will be 4, and then the expense dot description will be given there, and also the expenses amount also. There will be a currency formatted before the expenses amount, and then the delete expense is getting there. And how the delete expenses is mainly working, so we have used here the delete expenses, and the delete expenses is calling through the use budget. So let's say towards our use budgets, so inside our use budget, so we will just take over look over the delete expenses, and the delete expenses is working the same way. We are passing id and returning, and by filtering it will return. So we are using the same thing over here. We are passing the id with the delete expenses function or the delete budget, and the same thing is going on over here also. That is, it will first delete the budget, and to delete the expenses we have here the delete expenses function. We are passing the expenses id. So the same thing is going on for on, and the expenses id is basically this cross button over here. If I click over here, you can see it have deleted, and this is why we use react to see all the expenses. And here I have given 2200 rupees. I can just delete this whole entertainment expenses and or the budget, and by this way it is working. And I think you have understood, and I would suggest to look over the code once, and you can get all the things very fluently. It is not that much tough over here. And the delete budget, as I have also told, it is working on the same way, but there is one thing is that the delete budget will work on the same way, and it will clear the all the local storage also. So that's the thing I wanted to mention once again, that is the budget is not only clearing from once in the browser, as because it will also clear all from the local storage also, because we are rendering the previously saved value inside our browser only. We are not using any static data, we are using the mainly saved data in our local storage. So this delete function will mainly clear the delete budget function, will clear the budgets from local storage, and delete expenses function will clear all the expenses from local storage too. So by this we can conclude in our project, and I will give you a whole view of the project inside our browser. And this is the way we are creating our whole budgets app, and I think it look fancy now, and I hope you have followed along with me and completed the project. If you have any problem, you can just go through the video once, or you can just check the lecture, and you can just take the code from the lecture notes, and you can go through it. It is very easy to understand, and that's all. Thank you.